Hey everybody, Javon from Western Star Country Living. I am sporting a new hoodie that we have. It says faith and it looks like a cross. This is a Gildan size medium unisex, so they're a little smaller than just like, say a women's or something like that. No, they're a little bit larger. Oops, sorry about that. Anyway, I'm getting ready to read chapter 29. We're getting close to the end of the book. I've been trying to come on with a little bit of everything, crafting, cooking, country living. If you guys have any input and what else you'd like to see, or if you'd like to see anything, let me know. And I'm going to try to read this chapter without messing it up. This is my third take, and I'm still messing up. Okay, let me see if I can do it this time. That year we planted bacca and topped it high and primed it and cured it white yellow like they wanted. But it was the same in the end. We never got out of debt. But we had a couple of weddings and a birth that year. Old Sweetening came in late one night and said to Ma, "Ma, you gonna get up early in the morning?" And Ma knows that she was. "Well," Sweetening says, "I'm gonna get married tomorrow." He looked all around and shuffled his feet and sucked his teeth. "Now, Albert, that's a big decision to be making. You sure that you is ready for such a big move?" "Ain't no use to be trying to change my mind. I'm going to get married tomorrow." "Well, I'd think on it for a few days if I was you," Ma says. "Nah, Ma, I done gone too far to back down now. I done got the gal and she's in the other room, so I've got to poo or get off the pot, so to speak." "Well, if that's how it is, I guess that you'll have to get on with it, Ma Lowe's." "Ah, let him go, Rose," Pa says. "Hain't no use to try and change a feller's mind once he's got it made up. You just as well try to drain a river with a tin dipper." And then he went on back to sleep. Ma and Sweetening talked for another 30 minutes or so, and they went to bed. The reason I heard all this is I slept in the hallway in a feather bed. I laid down and pulled the other half over me, and that's how I slept while we lived in that house. The next morning they were up and at 'em for a farewell. Sweetening and Preacher, which was his gal's nickname, was in the other room with their arms all hugged up and raring to go at it in the big way. Some fella that Sweetening worked for every once in a while took them into town, and a justice of the peace married them. They moved into an old bacca barn that had no windows, no water, no bath, no nothing. Still, they made her go, and with all the trouble they had, they was together when old Sweetening passed away with a heart attack in a flea market, with Preacher holding him in her lap and a-waiting on the paramedics that never got there. If they had, it wouldn't have mattered. He was dead about the time that he hit the floor, but that was many years down the road. So much for the married ones. The other one was Nanny Claiborne Parrish. She had been going with this fella up in Parson County, and his name was Percy Clayton. No kin to us. He was a dog of another batch. Well, sir, this feller came to see Nanny, and he was all prized up in some new breeches and a white shirt and tie, smoking ready-made cigarettes. This feller was real if I never seen one. Anyways, this other feller had done dug him a hole and backed hisself in, and he wasn't going to move at all. Pa used to say he was like a hickory spout. You just can't dig him out no matter what you do. Now, old Percy was all put out to see his gal going with someone else, so he up and says to all in the living room, if you could call it that, "I know that there is a guy in here, and I want him to come out and fight me like a man, and not being setting there like a bump on a log and not saying nothing." Still, old Claiborne didn't move one way or the other. I think he knew that Percy could whip him, but he had a switchblade that he was dependent on to make the difference. No matter how he prodded him, Parrish wouldn't make a play. Finally, Percy got mad at Nanny and told her to make a choice, and he'd abide by her choice, so she chose old Claiborne, and Percy left in a huff. Shortly after that, Nanny and Claiborne got married and moved away to Creedmoor or someplace like that. Anyways, I didn't see her any more for a couple of years, since all of the folks didn't like her choice and let her live with it. The birth was of a brother to me and the rest of the tribe. He was born on a June morning into a hellhole, and he died in the same way 5 years later without ever knowing what it was to have a square meal or fit clothing to wear or a decent house to live in. Getting back to the story, Ma wakes up a hollering and going on, and Pa takes off to find a doctor someplace. He had to jog for 5 miles to fetch one, and when he got him, he delivered the kid and gave them hell for having a kid at their age. "The kid won't be any good. Y'all are too old to be having children," the doctor said. "Well, the Bible says to garnish, keep clean, and bring forth children. That's what I aim to do, says Ma. If the Lord don't want me to have any more children, then I guess I won't be having any more. Well, don't come after me anymore, the doc says. I have patients that are real sick, and I can't get around to them and help. I don't need any more sharecroppers to deliver. With that, he snapped up his bag and started to leave. I don't guess that it would do any good to ask for pay from you. I know that you don't have any money. Captain, you'll get your money. I'll attest to that, Pa says. Well, here's my card if you ever want to pay me. This is where you can send the money. If he ever got any, I didn't know about it. Ma named the boy Sidney. He was a pretty kid, but Sid had just too many strikes against him before he ever got started. There just wasn't nothing for him. The living conditions were terrible, so the kid just kept going downhill till it was all over. Pa had never been satisfied at the place that Amos had forced him into, and he had never been happy at all with the Dumplin' Baylock for making him take the place whether he wanted to or not. We were 50 miles from nowhere and nowhere to get back or know how. So old Dumplin' was going to try to make it up to Pa. He came over one day, and after scratching and coughing and farting and sneezing, he finally came to it. Tommy says, I got a place over by the road next to me, and I wondered if you would want that instead of this one. You talked about the old Brooks place, Pa asked. You talking about? Yes, that's the place, and it's got good back of land. I'll get you a cow and some hogs in the spring. I think that you and your folks will be happy over there. Well, I don't know, Pa says. The last time I made a bargain with you, it was a disaster. Yeah, I know it turned out that way for you, but that can't be helped now. It's in the past. Your boy and his wife can have that place down by the spring. They'll have water closer than they do now. You'll also have more acres of bacca over there. Well, I'll talk it over with my old woman, and I'll let you know, Pa says to him. That fall, Roosevelt won the election, and things were a little better for all of us. We came out with the WPA. He came out with the WPA and a lot of other crap that gave the men half money and half grocery. Dang me if we didn't grease the fat sow for a while. I'll give it up. We had cheese, beans, and a lot of canned stuff that was welfare, but that didn't make a difference to me, just as long as it filled me up. Pond sweetening got on the PWA in the winter, for we had to get up the back of beds in the spring. One other thing that happened, for we moved out of the old house that Amos lived in. Hattie and Amos's wife got on a binge and came up to our house crying about how he was a-beating her up and a-treating her bad. Why, just tonight he was a-standing over that Dink and a-looking at her. Dink is only a child. That's one sorry man, Ma says, and he'll have hell, and hell is too good of a place for him. You was always my friend, Hattie says, and I'm sorry for causing your boy all that trouble back then. Amos made them go testify against your boy. They didn't want to at all. William and Lewis had done made up, and all was over, and they were the best of friends now. All of the fighting and stuff was gone. We went through the same old crap till we moved over to the highway to the old Brooks place. It was like all the rest, maybe a little worse, sand in the yard and chainberry trees. I did have one heck of an experience. When we were moving, Herman, one of my Uncle Billy's boys, and my first cousin, Pa and the boys, plus me, loaded up a one-horse wagon with everything that we could think of. They hooked Beck up to the wagon and let me drive. Now don't start anything, you and Herman, Pa says, or the mule might run away with you. We went along almost of the way with no trouble at all, but old Beck didn't like these pots and things rattling behind her, and she was a skittery all the way there. Just as we turned into the house, a tub or something made a hell of a noise, and old Beck jumped 10 feet and started to trot. Herman said, "Give me one of the lines, and I'll help you hold her." Like a fool, I let him. She was scared, but I could have managed her. When she got pretty fast, he threw his line over the side and jumped off the wagon. The only thing that I could do was to pull on mine to turn the wagon over. So I tried to talk her down, but she won't be hearing any of that. So she broke into a gallop. I held on as long as I could, and then I had to jump. There was a steep hill with a couple of turns, and old Beck took it at a full gallop. When she made the first turn, pots and pans and buckets and lids, pots and what have you, went flying everywhere. I ran down to see what happened, and the front two wheels of the chaise was all that the mule had left when she went out of sight down the Cornwallis road. I doubt that the English went any faster when they built the road. Old Herman headed for home and left me holding the bag. I knew that I was in for trouble when Pa and the rest of them pulled into the yard. I told him what happened, and he beat me for not doing what he had said and letting Herman have the lines. He pulled off a frail from a tree and cut the blood out of my back down to my butt. I was sore for a week or two. Herman was the fellow that got me into the trouble, and he went scot-free. My lessons came hard most of the time, but I guess that's the way it is in all things. Pa made me pick up all the stuff and bring it to the house, and that didn't do my sore back any good, but I did it without a fuss. The Brooks place was not any better than the one we moved from. If anything, it was worse. There was a 2-room shack in the front and a kitchen with 1 room and an attic. That's where I slept while we lived there, in the attic. Sweetenin' and his bride lived down a ways in a 1-room whatever. The place did have a pretty good back allotment, and the land was not washed away quite as bad as the other place. We had to go up to the big house to get our mules and farming tools and take them back at night. That summer I had appendicitis, or a rupture of an appendix, whatever. I woke up with the worst pain in my stomach you would ever want to come up on, and I was a groaning and a moaning and couldn't get to the field to work. I think that this was the worst on Pa. He couldn't see any of us laying off for the day. All that boy needs is a big dose of Epsom salt, and that'll put him on his way faster than anything that I know. So he mixed me up a dose of the salts in warm water. Well, sir, it didn't do any good at all. In fact, it made it worse. My belly swelled up, and I began to lose control of my legs and turn green, and my stomach hurt so bad. Finally, they broke down and called a doctor, or at least someone up at the big house did. His name was Spikes, and he came out driving a new Chevrolet. He took one look at me and said, "We have to get this kid to the hospital, or he's going to die in another day." "Well, Captain, Pa says I ain't got any money to send this boy to the hospital. I'll take him on in, and you fight with the front office when you can to get into town. This boy is going to die if he don't get some attention. I don't guess I'm doing him any favors by saving him, but I took an oath to save all the lives that I could when I became a doctor, and I aim to stick by that oath." So he took me in his car to the emergency room at Watts Hospital. There I come up on a heck of a mess, all in white, and they commenced to give me the treatment. My surgeon was to be Dr. Manning, and he was about 6'3" and wouldn't have weighed 160 pounds soaking wet. This was one tall fella, and skinny he was. Before they put me under, he comes around and tells me what he's going to do. Not that I knew anything one way or two, but it was nice of him to tell me all about it. "Your appendix has erupted, and you're about to go into gangrene. If I don't get them out fast, you'll die very shortly." The last thing I remember was when they put the cone over my mouth. I woke up the next day with one sore belly and thirsty enough to drink a creek dry. This student nurse brought me some water and said that I wasn't to move around till the doctor came. That weren't hard to do because I couldn't move anyway. About that time, the doctor came by and looked at me. "Well, big fella, how do you feel this morning?" he asked. "I feel real bad, Doc, and that's no lie." "I would guess as much," he says. "You've been through a lot, and if the doctor hadn't brung you in, you wouldn't be with us today. Your appendix had bursted, and the stuff was about to put you into gangrene. I took the trouble out, and I left a tube in there to drain out the pus and stuff. I'll take it out in a few days. I'm going to have the nurse give you some juices, but no real food for a day or two." With that, he was gone, and I laid there wondering what I was a-doing here. Pretty soon, this nurse brought me some orange juice or something and a couple of pills. I drank the juice and went back to sleep. That went on for a few days, and then Dr. Manning came back and took the stitches out and the tube, too. It felt like a red-hot poker going in my side, but I didn't make a fuss. After they had swabbed the place with some pink stuff, they covered me back up. Before I could get back to sleep, the nurse came and gave me a spit bath and a clean gown or something, one of them ones that leaves your butt out and your front covered. I was feeling somewhat better by then, and they gave me some warm cereal and stuff. I was a-coming around. This head nurse came around and asked me if my bowels had moved today. I said, ma'am, I hain't gone since I've been in here, 'cause this makes sense, 'cause I hadn't eaten nothing to make me go. Well, she lows, I never. I'll see that you have a proper movement this day, and she fluffed off in a hurry to some other poor guy somewhere in the hospital. Pretty soon this fella comes in with a table on wheels and a lot of pots and things. He says that I have orders to give you an enema. I soon found out what that was. He greased up a big plug and rammed it up my rear and poured a quart of water into my belly. I thought that place that they cut was going to bust open. Finally, he pulled it out, and I wasn't prepared for the pressure that he had built up in me, for I let out a stream that would have done a hoss good that had been eating clover. It sounded like tearing of a rough piece of cloth. By dang, when you go, you really let her go, he said, and then he began to clean me up, and then he worked on the bed. I felt better after that. They brought a fella in and put him in a bed next to me. His name was Claude or something or other, and he was in a real bad shape, seeing as he had caught his wife and another fella together and pounced on the guy. Well, the other guy had beat him and broke his jaw in 3 places. They had it all wired together, and old Claude or whatever couldn't eat, only through a straw, and he was having a real tough time with all this hospital stuff and all. Really, the fellow's IQ was about like the room temperature. To say the least, he hadn't finished his rose out. He cried all the time and all through the night and groaned and moaned about his love life. Whilst he was up in the bed with his head all busted in, his wife and the other fellow was having at it back at the house. Yes, sir, old Claude was in a heck of a mess. Finally, they took the wires off so he could eat and talk a little, but he couldn't open his mouth but only so wide. One morning when his head nurse came around, and she always thought she was hot anyway, she come up on this fella and asked him if his bowels had moved this morning. Old Claude didn't know. Now, old Claude didn't know what she was saying or asking, that is. He was burning with shame that a woman was so close to him. So she asked him again. I don't know what you mean, he says. So the hot nurse turned and hollered at him. She says, have you pooped today? Real loud. Old Claude sort of whispered that he hadn't. I'll correct that, she says, and went off muttering about the crap that she had to put up with. There's not a brain in here, she said, lest it's in a pickle jar. Pretty soon, here comes the fellow with the wagon. Now, Claude has never seen one of these things, let alone know what they were going to do. I messed that up. Sorry about that. Pretty soon there comes this fellow with the wagon. Now Claude had never seen one of these things, let alone know that they were going to put it up his butt. So his eyes got real big, and he asked the fellow what he had in mind. I'm going to do what nature hasn't, he says. This didn't clear the air at all for old Claude, so he just waited for what was going to happen, I guess. The orderly got all his stuff together, and then he took the hose out and put grease on it. You lay down and retain all the water that I put in you, and when I say you can let go, you let your bowels move in the normal way, he told old Claude. Why, man, I never could poop up a hill, Claude yelled to the orderly. You will this time, he answered. You will. And he pushes Claude back and commences to let the fluid go in. In a little spell, Claude said to the fella, that's all I can take. No, you retain it, the feller says back. So Claude starts to holler, and take it out, stop, I'm busting open. Still, he was told to retain it. Well, sir, he was raising so much commotion that the head nurse came back to see what and all was going on. She jerked back the screen and started to ask what was going on. About that time, old Claude couldn't hold her any longer, and he let out a stream like you had knocked the bung out of a barrel. Seems like all the pent-up emotions broke loose at the same time. The orderly got it all over his hands and arms, but the nurse took it on her new uniform and all down the front. She turned and ran out of there madder than I've ever seen a person. The next day, I was put in another ward, and I never saw old Claude or any of the rest of them either. They put me in this ward with young boys about my age or a little older or younger than me. I was about ready to go home anyways. One thing happened to me. I sort of kept in mind they always kept things so clean and so, but nothing seemed to have any taste to it. Pa came and got me out. He had gotten a fella that had an old Chevy. I don't know what model. It had a seat and a bunch of boards on the back that the old man sat on. I was weaker than skim milk, and every little bump felt like a jump off of a hay wagon. But we got home all right. They had given me a diet for when I got home, but I knew that would go in the trash soon as we got there. Pa says that I had better hurry up and get well so I could help out in the field. So I laid around for a day, and then I went out and hoed some backup. I couldn't do much, for I had to rest. So I'd sit in the shade for a spell, and then I'd do a few more. That's the way, Pa Lowe's. Just keep doing a little at a time. I finally got well and began to earn my keep, as Pa always said. That year, Bill, my older brother, went into the CCC camp up North Wilkesboro, working on a scenic roadway that so many enjoy today. He had to send part of his money to Pa, and Pa liked that. We didn't do any better than we just had what we got to eat and a poor place to lay down. Sweetening did get a little better, though. His wife went to work at Irwin Sheets and Irwin Sheet Cotton Mill. They made spring-made sheets for the Pullman on the train. Sweetening bought him an old car and started to eat flour, bread, and meat with a streak of lean in the fat. On Friday, he bought fresh fish at the downtown market. Yes, sir, him and Preacher was a greasing the fat sow on the high side. And that's the end of chapter 29. Sorry, you guys, I messed that one up pretty good, but we're almost done, and I'm trying to get better. I don't know, I can't stop from stumbling. Part of it is I read through it first, and then I'm still just not familiar with the lingo, and I think I have it, and then I trip over my words. Anyway, I hope you guys are enjoying this. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.